I just got back from a couple of weeks in Africa where I was there to film and photograph the Great Migration. And while I was there, I had this idea to make this video that I wanted to show a couple of things. First of all, what the actual experience is like. I think that the expectation of what you're going to see here is a lot different than the reality of what this scene actually is like. And it's also a very, very difficult thing to photograph for a number of reasons, which I'm going to get into. So I kind of wanted to make this video to give you a couple tips and things like that so you have some ideas of some shots to take. But anyway, the most important thing and the biggest thing is just your expectation of what you're going to see here. I grew up watching these nature documentaries about the migration, and I thought it was going to be really this intimate experience where you're just there alone on the Mara River, and that couldn't be further from the truth. It's absolutely wild. It's kind of like a circus here. I mean, to be honest, there are so many other vehicles. And to be fair, it depends where you go and the time of year you go. This was the very beginning of the crossings in the Masai Mara. And I think that was bringing a lot more extra attention to it. So there were just vehicles everywhere. And the behavior, well, let me take a step back. I don't know if you've seen the recent behavior in Serengeti of people getting out of cars and things like that during the migration. It wasn't that bad, but as you can see, I mean, the cars are really, they're just pulling in spots they really shouldn't be. And at times they were even blocking some of the entrances to where the wildebeest want to come down to cross the river. And it really is just a shame. I mean, in all honesty, I don't think that the vehicles really bother the wildebeest that much, in the sense that as long as they're parked and still, the wildebeest are going to come right through them. However, when they're moving around and they're racing to get spots, that's where you see a lot of the bad behavior happen. And one positive thing was we actually did see scenes like this where rangers were actually backing people up. This was the first time that I've seen this personally, but even a lot of our guys were saying that that's new. So one way that we kind of got around this a little bit was I stayed in a camp that happened to be just a few minutes from where the crossings were. So if we had crossings that were early morning, first thing, or late afternoons, which actually happened quite often, we were one of the only few vehicles that were there. And that was such a better experience. I didn't know it at the time, but we were going to end up having one of the best weeks for crossings that they had seen in this area in many, many years. But on the first day, there was a big crossing going on, and we couldn't even really get a spot. And, you know, I kind of lost my cool. I was pretty pissed off because I couldn't get up to it. It was a really nice crossing, and it was like one of the first ones that we had seen. And you know, it was just such a bummer because there was just this magnificent crossing going on, and there were so many cars that we just couldn't even get a spot. And, you know, it really sucks because these trips are not cheap. You know, you pay a lot of money to come here to see this. And, you know, even that, the money aside, I mean, it's over tourism. There's just too many vehicles right now. And I really don't know what the answer is. I really don't think that they're going to slow this down. But anyway, let's get into some tips here. First thing I'm going to tell you is, if you see the animals come into the water, don't get excited. That doesn't mean that they're going to cross. I've seen a million times where something spooks them and boom, they turn around, they all run back. And a lot of times a typical crossing just takes hours and hours and hours to build up. And so you need a lot of patience. You know, they don't just typically come to the river and go. They don't really want to cross. They're nervous. They're scared. So it takes that, you know, critical mass to build up. Somebody either getting pushed in and then they go, or one brave one kind of starts and then the rest follow. So as far as photography goes, I brought 3 different lenses on this trip this year: my 600 f4, 400 2.8, and my Canon 100 to 500. And despite having all of these lenses, to be honest with you, I ended up shooting, like I usually do, the 100 to 500 almost all the time as far as crossings go, because I really, really like the flexibility of zooming in and going super tight or going out and going very wide. Crossings are very difficult because there's so many animals, so you have to kind of look for key moments. For example, most of the animals will come to the water to drink first before they go. So a lot of times, especially with zebras, you get these big lines of zebra that are all drinking at the same time. So those can make for cool shots. But once the crossings go, ideally you want dust because it makes it look so much cooler. But that also comes with its challenges, because if there's too much dust, it gets very hazy. So I found myself kind of zooming in and trying to isolate a couple wildebeest. And on the flip side of that, I even went super wide, and I just took a really fast shutter speed, and I just blasted all the way across the river as fast as I could, and was able to stitch a couple of these panoramas together so you could see the entire crossing. So once again, as far as this mass of wildebeest goes, you really just have to resign to the idea that you're going to have to cut something off on one edge or the other. These definitely make better videos than they do photos, but not everybody's in the video. So if you're not in the video and you want to take photos, be as creative as you can. If you're lucky enough, if you go later in the season and you have crossings, or if like I said, if you stay in a camp where you're closer and there's not as many vehicles, and you have the ability to move around and get different angles of the crossings. Me personally, I like it best when the wildebeest are coming at you. I think it just makes for a better angle. The challenge with that is you also can't block them when they're coming out. And more often than not, they change exit points a lot, or they kind of change the angle of which they're going. But when they're coming at you, it's just so much more dynamic. You're getting that head on. And that's one of the benefits of staying where we were in the Mara Triangle versus the Masai Mara Reserve side. As they're leaving the reserve and coming into the Mara Triangle, the people on the other side were getting all the butt shots as they were leaving, and they can't really see them coming down the bank there. So if you're in the Mara Triangle, you're always getting these head-on shots, which is amazing. And it allowed me to be a little bit more creative as far as, the head-on shot, where I was able to get a shot of them both entering and exiting at the same time, which I thought was kind of neat. Being able to zoom in on the ones going down the bank as the other ones were exiting. But some things to look for too in photos. The best case scenario is you get these S-curves. They by far make the best photos. Instead of just a straight line of animals going on a side profile. Again, this takes a lot of luck being in the right spot and for things to come together. But if you get them coming at you and in an S-curve, that's the ideal situation, and hands down makes the best photos. I also think one of the most underrated scenes is once they leave the river and they start flooding the fields behind you, you can get a lot of cool different shots here too. I don't think as many people focus on this. They come into the grasslands where they're going to feed. And a lot of times when they're here, they're starting to run through the fields. So you can play with some more artistic stuff like these slow panning shots as they're running. These I probably took 1,000 shots to get maybe 5 to 10 that were sharp, because they're running and you're shooting at shutter speeds of like 1/20th to 1/40th of a second. So it's a challenge, but it's also a fun angle to shoot. All right, so let's talk about what is either everybody's favorite part or everybody's least favorite part, and that is the predators that come with the Great Migration. Now, I kind of was under the assumption my first time going here that every time the wildebeest crossed, there was going to be all of these casualties. That pretty much is not the case. Now, it's very random, at least in my experiences, when you're going to see lions and crocs. For example, let's start with the lions. My first day here, again, this was very beginning of the migration. The lions were just smashing wildebeest one after another, most of the time not even eating them. When they see this huge number of animals running, it just triggers their senses and they go nuts. And they must have killed probably 10 to 12 wildebeest on the first day when we were there. And like I said, they weren't even eating them. Now, not all of those kills are you going to see. And, a lot of times it happened in bad areas. And this was not the norm. This would happen on the first day, and then it pretty much didn't happen for the rest of the trip. Whether they were full or just tired, they were able to be a lot pickier as to what they eat. They don't really want to exert themselves like this young lion here that's learning how to hunt does. They're just going to take the easy pickings. So we really didn't see a lot of lion action after the first day, that first chaotic day, which was ridiculous. But next, as far as crocs go, that was another thing too. You think you're seeing all these wildebeest go by and crocs that haven't eaten in like a year. You think they'd be smashing wildebeest too, one after another, but they really weren't either. So I don't know. We got a few, but even with the croc kills, most of the time they just drag them underwater and drown them, so it's not even that dynamic a lot of the times. But if you get lucky, maybe you'll see that, or unlucky, depending on your views on that. But like I said, this seems like a lot of negative stuff. I know it sounds like that because I just really was overwhelmed with the human impact on this entire scene. But that said, this is still absolutely one of the most amazing things, if not the most amazing thing I've ever seen. And if you just go in knowing I'm going to have to deal with a lot of vehicles and other people here, you're still going to have an unbelievable time. So I hope this helped. I'll leave you with a couple, this one last video clip and then a bunch of other photos that I took that maybe will give you some ideas, or if you just want to see what I shot. And I hope that you found this helpful, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks so much for watching.